We have to
They
keep
left the
moving. The
Barren
storm is coming
Omega to die
fast.
in the blizzard.
We
The
can't
Alpha
outrun
King
it, not
claimed
in
her
this
at
gear.
dawn.
We need shelter
The
now.
land was barren, a wasteland of snow and gray skies, where even the strongest trees bent and broke under the relentless storm. In this desolate place, the weak had no place. And yet, among the swirling blizzard, a single figure moved, barely clinging to life. Elara stumbled forward, her legs trembling beneath her, her arms wrapped around herself in a desperate attempt to hold in what little warmth remained. She had never imagined the world could be this cruel. The villagers had left her here, abandoned her in the storm as though she were nothing more than a broken tool, unworthy of life. "You will not survive the night," one of them had sneered. "The snow takes the weak, and you are weak." Elara's heart ached with more than cold. It ached with betrayal, with the bitter sting of rejection. She had always known she was different, smaller, frailer, quieter than the other children. But she had hoped that somewhere, someone might see past her weakness. Instead, she was left alone, the howling wind her only companion, her own fear echoing back at her in every gust. Her fingers were numb, almost useless, and her legs threatened to collapse beneath her weight. She fell to the snow, pressing her face to the icy ground, hoping against hope that the cold would take her quickly, that the pain would end before she had to face another moment of loneliness. And yet, deep inside, something stubborn stirred. A flicker of life, a whisper of defiance that refused to let her give in completely. Hours passed, though time seemed meaningless in the endless white. Her breaths came in ragged gasps, her vision blurred by snow and exhaustion. She thought of home, of the warmth of her mother's voice before she was cast out, of the small fire that had once welcomed her. Those memories were distant now, like fragments of another life, yet they carried a strange comfort, a reminder that she had once been loved. And then through the swirl of snow, a shadow appeared. At first, Elara thought it was a trick of the storm, a shape conjured by her mind. But it moved with purpose, cutting through the blizzard like a blade. She squinted, her frozen eyes trying to make sense of the figure. A man, tall, broad, moving with a strength that seemed almost unnatural. His cloak, dark and heavy, trailed behind him, and in the dim light he seemed more shadow than flesh. Elara's heart leapt, not with hope but with fear. Who could this be, wandering the storm when even the hardiest warriors would not dare? She tried to scramble back, but her body betrayed her, and she fell once more into the snow. The figure stopped a few paces away, watching her. His presence was overwhelming, powerful, commanding in a way that made her feel both small and exposed. He did not speak at first. He simply looked at her, and in his eyes she saw a strange mixture of curiosity, authority, and something that made her heart race, something she could not name. "You are far from safe," he finally said, his voice low and steady, carrying over the roar of the wind as if he commanded it. There was no anger in his tone, no judgment, only fact. "Why are you here, little one?" Elara could not answer. Words failed her, leaving only a choking sob that melted into the storm. The man studied her for a moment longer before he took another step forward. The snow around him seemed to bend and swirl at his will, as though the storm itself recognized his authority. "Stand," he commanded, and despite the pain and numbness, Elara obeyed. She rose slowly, leaning on trembling legs, her body aching in every joint. The man reached out, a single gloved hand hovering near her shoulder. She flinched instinctively, unsure if he meant harm or aid. "Fear does not suit you," he said quietly. Then, as though deciding she was worth saving, he grasped her arm firmly. "I will take you to shelter. You will survive this storm if you follow me." Elara wanted to resist, to fight for the small dignity left to her, but she was too weak. The storm had already taken too much from her. She allowed herself to be led, step by step, through the blinding snow. Every movement was agony, yet the man's presence was strangely grounding, a fixed point in the chaos of her world. The journey felt endless. Snowdrifts rose like walls, and the wind struck them with unrelenting force. Yet the man pressed forward without hesitation, moving with a strength and determination that seemed almost otherworldly. Every so often, he would glance back at her, ensuring she was still following, still clinging to life. Finally, as dawn began to break, the storm's fury lessened, revealing a distant fortress carved from black stone and ice. Its towers pierced the gray sky like blades, and its walls glimmered with frost that sparkled in the weak light of morning. The man guided her inside, and the warmth of the stone hearths began to seep into her frozen limbs. Inside, the halls were vast and echoing, filled with shadows that danced along the walls. Alara's eyes widened as she took in the grandeur of the fortress. The intricate carvings of kings and queens long past, the banners fluttering in the faint light, the sense of history and power that clung to every surface. She had never imagined a place like this, and yet despite its beauty it felt cold, imposing, and alive with secrets. The man released her arm and stepped back, his dark cloak brushing the floor. "You are safe for now," he said, his gaze piercing. "I am Kalen, Alpha King of this realm, and you will remain under my protection." Alara's breath caught. The title alone carried weight, a force that commanded respect and fear. She had never seen him as a king, never imagined such power in a single human being. And yet, as she looked at him, standing tall and unyielding, she felt something unexpected. Not fear, not only fear, but fascination. Something in him stirred a strange, unfamiliar hope, though she could not yet trust it. Kalen studied her quietly as if weighing her worth, measuring her strength against the storm she had survived. "You were abandoned," he said finally, his voice softer now. "And yet you lived. That is no small feat. Few could endure what you have endured." Alara lowered her eyes, shame and gratitude mingling together. I did not want to die," she admitted. "I only wanted to be seen." Kalen's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained sharp and commanding. "Then you have been seen." "By me." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken meaning. "And now you will learn what it means to survive and to claim your own strength." The day passed in quiet lessons of warmth and rest. Alara ate for the first time in what felt like weeks, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel the strange comfort of protection. Yet the shadow of doubt lingered. Who was this man, this Alpha King? Why had he saved her when others had left her to die? And what did it mean that she felt her pulse quicken when he was near, as if the storm outside had seeped into her heart? That night, as the fortress lay silent and snow continued to fall beyond the walls, Alara could not sleep. She wandered to a balcony overlooking the frozen plains, the moonlight painting the snow in silver. She thought of the villagers who had abandoned her, of the cold and hunger, and of the strange figure who had appeared in the storm and claimed her life as his responsibility. And then she felt it, a presence behind her, silent but undeniable. Kalen stepped onto the balcony, the wind catching his cloak like a living shadow. He did not speak immediately, merely stood a pace behind her, his eyes on the distant horizon. "You have endured much," he said at last, his voice low and intimate, carrying over the icy winds. "And yet you are not broken." Alara turned to him, her breath trembling, her heart a wild rhythm against the cold. I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. "I only know I am alone." Kalen stepped closer, the air between them charged with something she could not name, fear, awe, and something deeper. He extended a hand, not commanding but offering. "You are not alone, not while I stand here. You may yet discover the strength within you, the strength you have always carried, even when no one else could see it." For a long moment, silence passed, broken only by the whisper of snow against stone. Then, almost imperceptibly, Alara reached for his hand. And in that simple touch, the storm outside seemed to still, if only for a heartbeat. But as the night deepened, a sense of foreboding lingered. Beyond the fortress walls, the blizzard had not fully ended. And somewhere in the frozen expanse, others waited, watching, plotting, ready to test the fragile bond between the abandoned Omega and the Alpha King who had claimed her. Elara shivered, not from cold alone. She knew that her journey had only just begun. And as Kaelin watched her with eyes that held both fire and ice, she realized that her survival would demand more than courage. It would demand trust, strength, and a heart willing to face storms both outside and within. The dawn approached, pale and fragile, and the first light fell upon the fortress of ice and shadow. It glimmered like a promise and a warning. The Omega had survived the storm. But the true trial, she knew, was only just beginning. The fortress of ice and stone loomed silently under the pale dawn. Its towers glimmered with frost, sharp as blades, and the halls whispered with the echoes of centuries. Within its walls, Elara felt both awe and fear. The warmth from the hearths fought against the chill that clung to her bones, but it could not chase away the memories of abandonment, nor the unease that this strange man, Kaelin, stirred within her. Kaelin walked beside her through the vast corridors, his steps steady and deliberate. He spoke little, yet each word carried weight, a reminder that in this place he ruled not just with power, but with a presence that seemed almost supernatural. The silence between them was heavy, charged with unspoken questions, longing, and the knowledge that both were being tested, by each other and by the world outside. "You will stay in the East Wing," Kaelin said at last, his voice firm but not cruel. "It is secure. No one will harm you there. You will eat, rest, and learn. You will grow strong, or you will learn why weakness can be fatal." Elara nodded silently, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. The words were not threats, yet they carried authority so absolute that resistance felt almost impossible. She followed him to her chambers, small yet elegant, the walls lined with frost-carved runes that glimmered faintly in the morning light. A fire burned in the hearth, crackling softly, offering the first warmth she had felt in days. Why did you save me?" she asked quietly, breaking the silence as he turned to leave. Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with the raw vulnerability of someone who had known only abandonment. Kaelin paused, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. He studied her, and for the first time, Elara saw something beyond authority, something almost human, though buried beneath layers of strength and command. "Because even the weak have a role in the storm," he said finally, "and because I saw in you a spark. It may be faint, but it will burn if you do not allow it to die." Elara lowered her gaze, unsure what to say. A spark, a role in the storm. The words felt heavy with meaning, yet she could not grasp their full weight. She was an Omega, abandoned, fragile, yet somehow this man believed she had worth. The thought was both frightening and strangely comforting. Over the next days, life in the fortress became a harsh lesson in survival. Kaelin trained her in the ways of the land, teaching her how to move through snow, how to sense danger, and how to endure the cold that threatened to consume her. Each day, the exercises grew more demanding, pushing her body and mind to their limits. And each day she felt Kaelin's presence more keenly, his gaze following her with a mixture of expectation and something else, something she could not name. Despite his sternness, there were moments when Kaelin's guard slipped. Small gestures, a hand brushing against hers as he adjusted her stance, a fleeting look of concern when she faltered, stirred a strange warmth in her chest. She had never known such attention, and though it frightened her, it also ignited a yearning she could not deny. Kaelin, for his part, wrestled with his own inner conflict. He had claimed her in the storm, and he felt the weight of that claim deeply. She was not just an Omega to him. She was a challenge, a mystery, and perhaps the only person who could reach through the icy armor he had built around himself. Her presence stirred emotions he had long buried, affection, admiration, a strange longing that he did not yet understand. The fortress itself seemed alive, almost sentient. The walls hummed with the magic of ancient kings and queens, guardians of a time when the world had been young and raw. Elara could feel it in her bones. the echo of old power, the pull of destinies intertwined, the sense that her survival here was no accident. She carried something within her, something dangerous yet beautiful, and Kalen recognized it even if he could not name it. One evening, as the northern lights danced across the sky in green and violet streaks, Alara sat by the fire, exhausted but restless. Kalen entered the chamber silently, his cloak brushing the floor, and stood for a moment watching her. The flickering firelight cast shadows across his face, making him seem both terrifying and divine. "You are thinking too much," he said softly, not as a command but as an observation. "You cannot control everything, nor can you predict the storm. You survive by learning when to bend and when to stand tall." Alara looked at him, her eyes wide. "And if I fail?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kalen's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability slipping through his stoic exterior. "Then the storm will take you," he said, almost regretfully. "But I believe you will not fail. You have survived worse than the wind and snow. You have survived being abandoned. That is a strength few possess." Her chest tightened at his words. They were simple, yet they carried a weight that left her breathless. She had never been praised for strength, only for obedience or silence. To hear him recognize her resilience, her ability to endure, stirred something deep within her, a sense of worth she had long thought impossible. Days passed, and their bond grew, subtle yet undeniable. Kalen's lessons became more than physical. He tested her mind and spirit, teaching her the ways of leadership, strategy, and the arcane forces that lingered in the frozen kingdom. Alara began to see him not just as a protector, but as a man burdened by responsibility, by history, by the weight of being Alpha King. And she realized that beneath his icy exterior lay a heart capable of care, even if he struggled to show it. Yet the world beyond the fortress walls was not idle. Whispers traveled across the snow, carried on the wind by those who had once abandoned Alara. They spoke of her survival, of the Alpha King who had claimed her. Some saw her as a threat, a pawn of Kalen's, while others saw an opportunity to exploit her mysterious power. Shadows stirred beyond the fortress, and Alara began to understand that the storm was not only the snow and wind, it was the world itself, testing her, shaping her, demanding her growth. One night, Kalen led her to the highest tower of the fortress. The wind tore at their cloaks, and the cold bit through layers of clothing, but the view was breathtaking. The frozen plain stretched endlessly, a world of white and shadow under the shimmering northern lights. "Look," Kalen said, his voice quieter than usual, almost reverent. "All of this, the storms, the ice, the ruins of old kingdoms, they are yours to face if you are strong enough. And someday you may command them, not through fear, but through understanding, through courage." Alara shivered, partly from the cold, partly from the weight of his words. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, her voice small yet sincere. "I am just me, an Omega, weak, abandoned, forgotten." Kalen's gaze softened, and for a moment the fierce Alpha that the world feared seemed to fade. "You are not just an Omega," he said. "You are someone who has survived where others would have perished. That is strength beyond measure, and perhaps that is why I chose you. Not because I needed you, but because you are worth saving." Alara's heart pounded. His words carried more than reassurance. They carried a promise, a recognition, and an unspoken connection that she could not ignore. Yet even as warmth blossomed in her chest, a flicker of fear remained. What did it mean to be claimed by someone so powerful? Could she trust the feelings stirring between them, or would the world outside tear them apart before they had a chance? The next day, Kalen tested her in ways she had not expected. He led her to the courtyard, where the remnants of the blizzard still lingered, snow and ice crunching underfoot. He handed her a staff, carved from the dark wood of ancient trees, imbued with runes that shimmered faintly. "Control it," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "This is not just wood. It responds to strength of will, to courage, to intent." Show me that you can wield it, or you will not survive the trials ahead. Alara gripped the staff with trembling hands. She focused, trying to feel the energy flowing through it, the pulse of magic that seemed to hum with the fortress itself. At first, nothing happened. The staff felt heavy, unyielding, a reminder of her own inexperience. But Kalen's eyes never left her. His presence was steady, grounding, a silent reassurance that she was not alone. Then slowly, the staff responded. A faint glow traveled along its length, warm and steady, as if acknowledging her will. Ilara gasped, her pulse quickening. She had done it. She had controlled it, if only for a moment. And in that moment, Kalen's expression softened, pride and something deeper flickering in his eyes. "You are learning," he said simply, though the weight of the words lingered. "And you are stronger than you believe." Ilara lowered the staff, her hand still shaking. She felt a strange mixture of triumph and fear. The fortress, the snow, Kalen, everything was larger than life, larger than anything she had known. Yet she felt, for the first time, that she belonged somewhere, that she had a purpose beyond survival. That night as she lay in her chambers, Ilara could not sleep. She thought of Kalen, of his piercing gaze, his quiet authority, and the strange warmth that stirred within her. She thought of the staff, of the magic she had barely begun to understand, and of the storm outside that still raged, distant but never-ending. And she realized that her journey had only just begun. She was no longer the abandoned Omega left to die in the blizzard. She was something more, someone with power, with potential, with a bond to a man who could both terrify and protect her. Yet even as hope and determination began to take root, a shadow lingered at the edges of her mind. Beyond the fortress walls, enemies watched. Whispers of magic, betrayal, and old grudges moved like the wind. The storm was far from over, and Ilara knew that the trials ahead would test not only her body, but her heart, her trust, and her very soul. But she would not turn back. She could not. For the first time, she understood that survival was more than enduring the cold. It was embracing the fire within, the spark that Kalen had seen, and letting it burn bright enough to face whatever darkness awaited. And as the northern lights danced once more over the frozen fortress, casting a green and violet glow across the ice, Kalen watched from the shadows, a mixture of pride, concern, and something deeper in his gaze. The bond between them had begun, fragile yet undeniable, and the world outside would tremble when it realized that the abandoned Omega was no longer powerless. But danger lurked, unseen yet palpable. And when it struck, Ilara would have to choose, trust the Alpha who had claimed her or face the storm alone. The fortress held its breath. The blizzard waited. And the bond between Omega and Alpha, forged in snow and ice, was only beginning to burn. It came at dusk, rolling over the frozen plains like a living thing, dark clouds twisting low over the land. The wind screamed against the fortress walls, and snow struck stone with such force that even the strongest towers trembled. Ilara felt it before the horn sounded. She stood in the eastern hall, one hand resting against the cold stone wall, her breath uneven. Something deep inside her stirred, restless and sharp, like a warning whispered through her bones. The same feeling she had known the night she was left to die in the blizzard. Danger was close. The horns rang out, long and urgent. Servants moved quickly, guards taking their places. The fortress, once calm and watchful, became a living thing preparing for battle. Kalen entered the hall with swift, powerful steps. His cloak snapped behind him like a shadow torn from the storm. His eyes found Ilara instantly. "You feel it," he said, not as a question. She nodded. "Yes, it's different this time. The storm feels wrong, like it is hiding something." Kalen's jaw tightened. "It is. They have come sooner than I expected." "Who?" Ilara asked. "The ones who fear what you may become," he replied, "and the ones who regret leaving you to die." Her heart clenched. "My village." "Not all," Kalen said, "but enough." The truth struck her harder than the wind outside. They had not forgotten her. They had watched, waited. And now that she lived, now that she stood under the Alpha King's protection, they had returned, not for forgiveness, but for control. Kaelin placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and grounding. You will remain inside the inner keep. No matter what happens, you do not leave. Alara looked up at him. You think they came for me? I know they did. A silence fell between them, heavy and sharp. Alara felt fear, but beneath it burned something else, anger and a growing strength she had not known before. I will not hide, she said quietly. Kaelin's eyes darkened. This is not a request, this is command. She met his gaze, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. You taught me survival, you taught me strength. If I hide now, then I am still the girl they abandoned. The wind howled louder as if the world itself listened. Kaelin said nothing for a long moment, then he exhaled slowly. You are not ready. Neither was I ready to be left in the snow, Alara replied, but I survived. Her words struck something deep within him. He saw not weakness but fire, raw, untrained, yet fierce. Stay near me, he said at last. If you step into this storm, you do so under my watch. Relief and fear tangled inside her. I will. The gates of the fortress opened with a thunderous groan. Figures emerged from the white, cloaked, armed, moving with purpose. Among them were faces Alara recognized. Elders, hunters, people who once looked through her as if she were nothing. Now they would not meet her eyes. Kaelin stood tall before them, power rolling from him like cold fire. You trespass on Alpha land, he said, his voice cutting through the storm. Speak your reason or leave. An elder stepped forward, his voice shaking not with fear but with pride. We came for what is ours. Alara felt Kaelin stiffen. She is not yours, Kaelin said. She stands under my claim. Murmurs spread through the group. Fear, anger, greed. She carries old power, the elder continued. Power she does not understand, power that does not belong in your hands. Alara stepped forward before Kaelin could stop her. I understand enough, she said, her voice trembling but strong. I understand that you left me to die. The elder's eyes flickered. You were weak. And yet, she said, lifting her chin, I lived. The storm shifted. The air grew heavy. Kaelin watched her carefully. He felt it now, the change within her. Her presence pulled at the magic woven into the land itself. This ends now, Kaelin said. Leave. The response was immediate. Chains of glowing frost burst from the snow, rising like living things. Magic ancient and cruel lashed toward Alara. Kaelin moved instantly, stepping in front of her, raising his arm. The magic struck an unseen barrier, exploding into light and ice. No, Alara cried. They're using me as the focus. Kaelin glanced at her sharply. Then break it. I don't know how. Yes, you do, he said fiercely. You feel it, trust it. The chains tightened, pulling at her breath, her thoughts. Alara closed her eyes. She remembered the blizzard, the cold. The silence, the moment she refused to die. She reached inward not for fear but for that stubborn spark. The air cracked. Light spilled from her hands, not blinding, not violent, but steady and warm, like dawn breaking through ice. The chains shattered, falling into nothing. The attackers stumbled back in shock. Kaelin stared. She had done it, but power always demands a price. The ground beneath Alara split with a sharp cry of stone. A pulse of magic surged outward, knocking her to her knees. Pain burned through her chest, sharp and sudden. Alara, Kaelin reached her, catching her before she fell. Her breath came in gasps. I can't stop it. The magic surged again, wild and uncontrolled. The storm above twisted, responding to her fear. Listen to me, Kaelin said, gripping her shoulders. You are not alone. You do not carry this by yourself. She looked at him, tears freezing on her lashes. What if I destroy everything? Then I will stand with you, he said without hesitation. Even then, those words broke through her panic. She focused on him, his voice, his presence, the steady strength he offered without demand. Slowly, the magic settled, pulling back like a tide obeying the moon. Silence fell. The attackers fled into the storm, fear replacing their cruelty. Alara collapsed into Kaelin's arms, exhausted beyond words. He carried her back into the fortress without a word. Inside the inner chamber, warmth surrounded them, but the air remained heavy. Alara lay on the bed, her skin pale, her breathing shallow. Kaelin stood beside her, his hands clenched at his sides. He had faced wars, betrayal, death, but nothing frightened him like the thought of losing her. She opened her eyes slowly. "Did I fail?" "No," he said quietly. "You survived again." Her gaze softened. "You stayed." "I always will," he replied. The words hung between them, simple, dangerous, true. But before either could speak further, the fortress shook. A deep sound echoed through the halls, not wind, not thunder, but something older. Kaelin turned sharply. "The curse." Alara struggled to sit up. "What curse?" Kaelin's voice was grim. "The one tied to my bloodline, the one waiting for a moment of weakness." The walls darkened as ancient runes ignited, glowing red beneath the stone. A voice rose, not spoken but felt. "The bond has awakened." Alara's heart pounded. "It's because of me." "Yes," Kaelin said, "and because of us." The magic reacted to their connection, the trust, the shared strength, the unspoken bond growing between Alpha and Omega. The curse stirred, sensing change. Kaelin looked down at Alara, his expression torn between fear and resolve. "If the curse fully awakens, it will force a choice." "What kind of choice?" she whispered. "One that may cost you your freedom," he said, "or cost me my crown." The runes burned brighter. Outside, the storm gathered again, darker than before. Alara reached for Kaelin's hand, gripping it tightly. "Whatever comes, I will not run." He closed his hand around hers. "Neither will I," but deep within the fortress, something ancient smiled. The storm was no longer waiting. It was coming. Ancient runes burned beneath the stone floors, glowing red like embers long buried. The walls whispered with voices of the past, kings, queens, warriors, and lost souls bound to the land by oath and blood. Alara felt it all. The curse was awake. She stood beside Kaelin in the heart chamber of the fortress, where the ceiling rose high and the stone floor was marked with symbols older than the kingdom itself. The air was heavy, thick with power and memory. Every breath felt like a choice. "What is the curse?" Alara asked quietly. Kaelin did not look at her at first. His gaze was fixed on the center of the chamber, where the runes pulsed in slow, painful rhythm. "My bloodline," he said, his voice steady but strained, "was built on conquest and survival. Long ago, the first Alpha King bound the storm itself to his rule. It gave him strength but demanded obedience." Alara's chest tightened. "Obedience to what?" "To power without mercy," Kaelin said. "To rule without softness. To never choose love over control." The chamber shook again. "And if an Alpha does?" Alara asked. Kaelin finally turned to her. His eyes held truth and fear. "Then the curse demands payment." The runes flared brighter. A voice filled the chamber, deep and ancient, felt more than heard. "The Alpha has broken the old law." Alara felt Kaelin stiffen beside her. "He has sheltered the abandoned. He has chosen bond over command." The voice echoed through her bones. "The storm demands balance." The floor split open at the center of the chamber, revealing swirling wind and shadow beneath, a living storm bound by magic older than memory. Kaelin stepped forward. "Take me," he said without hesitation. "End this with my blood." Alara grabbed his arm. "No." He looked down at her, startled. "You are the Alpha King," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "Your people need you." "And I need you alive," he replied softly. She shook her head. "This curse was built on power without compassion. It cannot be broken by sacrifice alone." The storm roared louder, responding to her words. Alara stepped forward, closer to the edge of the chasm. The wind pulled at her hair, her clothes, her breath. "Then let me speak," she said. Kaelin reached for her. "Alara, don't." She turned back to him. "You trusted me when I was nothing. Now trust me again." Slowly, reluctantly, he released her hand. Alara faced the storm. "I was abandoned," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "Cast aside because I was seen as weak, but weakness did not end me. It shaped me. The storm shifted. I do not seek to rule, she continued. I do not seek control, I seek balance, strength with care, power with mercy. The wind slowed, listening. Alara lifted her hands, not in command, but in offering. If the curse demands payment, then let it take what it was built upon. Take fear, take cruelty, take the need to dominate. The runes flickered. Kalen felt something break inside the stone and inside himself. The ancient voice spoke again, quieter now. Balance must be chosen. Alara turned to Kalen. This kingdom needs an alpha who rules with strength and heart, and it needs an omega who stands, not kneels. She held out her hand to him. Choose with me, she said. Kalen stepped forward. He placed his hand in hers. The storm screamed. Light and shadow collided, tearing through the chamber. The wind surged upward, ripping the ancient curse from the stone like roots pulled from frozen ground. Kalen cried out, not in pain but release. Memories flooded him, the weight of the crown, the cold lessons of power, the loneliness of command. They shattered, falling away like ice breaking under spring sun. Alara held him steady. Breathe, she whispered. The storm collapsed inward, folding into itself, shrinking until it vanished in a single, thunderless silence. The runes dimmed, the fortress stilled. For a long moment there was nothing but breath and heartbeat. Then light, morning light. Sunrise poured through the high windows, golden and warm, touching stone that had not known gentleness in centuries. The frost along the walls melted into clear water, running like tears that carried no sorrow. Kalen sank to one knee, overwhelmed. Alara knelt with him, her hand still in his. It's over, she said softly. He looked up at her, disbelief and awe in his eyes. You broke it. No, she said. We did. Outside, the blizzard was gone. The people gathered in the courtyard as the gates opened. They stared in silence as Kalen emerged, not as a storm-born ruler but as a man reborn. Alara walked beside him, whispers spread. The curse is gone. The storm has ended. The Omega stands with the Alpha. Kalen stopped before them all. For generations, he said, his voice strong and clear, this kingdom ruled through fear. Today that ends. He turned to Alara and took her hand openly. This woman was cast out as weak, yet she carried the strength to change us all. From this day forward, no one is measured by what they lack, but by what they endure. The people bowed not to command but to truth. Days passed. The snow melted into rivers. Crops took root in land once thought dead. The fortress softened, not losing strength but gaining warmth. Alara stood on the balcony where she once feared the night. Kalen joined her, quieter now, lighter. You could have left, he said, after everything. She smiled gently. So could you. He studied her. Stay. It was not a command, it was a choice. She turned to him. I will. Not as something claimed, but as someone chosen. He nodded. That is how it should be. At dawn, they stood together as the sun rose over a land reborn. No longer Alpha and Omega bound by storm and survival, but equals shaped by loss, forged by trust, and bound by a bond neither power nor fear could break. The blizzard had ended, and from its silence something stronger had begun.